Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing David Foster Wallace's novel, The Pale King. I'll talk a little bit about my background with the author, the background of this novel, go into a plot summary, and then I'll start with what I liked about the book, finish off with what I didn't like about the book, go into some recommendations, and then we'll finish off with what I will be reviewing next time. So this is a little bit of a strange book to review. It is really an unfinished novel in the sense that David Foster Wallace passed away due to an apparent suicide in 2008. The editor of the book, who talks a little bit about the process of editing this particular novel at the beginning of the audiobook that I listened to, explains the process that he went through, as well as the fact that it really is unfinished in the sense that no one really knows what David's input would have been had he survived to work on this further. The editor kind of talks about how he had a choice of putting this in a museum of some sort or publishing it as he saw fit, and he chose to publish it. For those who don't know, David Foster Wallace is probably best known for his novel Infinite Jest, which was one of my favorite novels I read in college. I haven't read it since, but I've definitely recommended it and given it away as a gift to many people. I think it's a great work, and I recommend it to anyone who hasn't read that. But to get into this novel, The Pale King, I wanted to give that kind of background before I kind of talked a little bit about it. The plot is a little bit difficult to explain. It's probably the closest thing I've read to a plotless novel. The plot surrounds a group of IRS agents at a regional, regional site in the Midwest in Illinois, and it really kind of goes into their background in terms of what they are trying to do, in terms of promotion, and in terms of their work at how they see their work at the IRS, how others see it, and kind of the monotony of the job, the boringness of the job, and how they kind of deal with that or don't deal with that. So what did I like about the book? This book is very much in the same style as other fiction writings I've read of David Foster Wallace. It's very, very funny in certain parts. I think the themes of the novel come through very strongly in terms of just the human foibles and dealing with the boredom and the tediousness of what would be this job. The book is set in the 1980s. I think it does a good job of giving you enough of a distance in terms of time, but still making the book relatable to someone reading it today. I think the themes of the book that come through the strongest, along with the dealing with the boredom, is kind of the nobility in dealing with boredom and the nobility in doing work that kind of no one else wants to do but needs to be done. I thought those things came through really strongly. I think some of the shorter pieces of the novel are some of the best pieces. I think David Foster Wallace obviously has an ear for the foibles of people and the tics of people, and kind of the uniqueness of his characters, I think, comes through really strongly. I guess some of the things I didn't like as much, this is very much an unfinished novel, as kind of stated before. There's some passages, as much as I like the writing in certain passages, I think it's hard sometimes to connect certain passages in the novel with the overall themes. There are certain characters who appear. There's a character who's like who's kind of obsessed with his sweat. There's another character who is like the best child ever, but everybody hates him. Some of these things don't tie into the novel very well. It's kind of unclear sometimes if these are recurring characters or these kind of one-offs. Like I said, the novel is in a lot of ways plotless. Some of the characters kind of drift in and out of the novel, but there's no real through line in terms of a story arc for really any of them. One of the themes that the editor kind of talks about is the theme of starting stories and not finishing them, or not having a conclusion to some stories. And you see that kind of throughout the novel. There's actually some really interesting writing in terms of certain stories. There's one character whose father dies in an MTA accident, and his story is never really resolved. So that's, I think, by design, that's the way that the book is, but it's still also very frustrating. And I guess overall the book is just difficult to judge on in some way because it is really, without the author's final stamp on it, you're judging. It's almost like judging an early draft or half of a painting or something. It really is difficult to kind of come down one way or the other. You can only really judge what you have and what you receive. And so it's a little bit of a disappointing work in that sense, because I don't think it quite lives up to its predecessor. I don't think it's a bad book, but I do think there's definitely a spark that's lost. There are a lot of long passages, some of which relate to the theme and some do not. That probably could have been cut. There are obviously really funny moments in the book, but as a whole, it's a little bit of a slog to get through, and the writing is maybe not as sharp as it could be in some places. There are certain words and phrases that are repeated as if this is an earlier draft. I'd be curious to see how much of the book the editor thinks is like quote unquote done. That'd be something that'd be interesting. So I guess overall, who would I recommend this book to? I would really recommend it to David Foster Wallace completists. I don't think, if you're someone who's never read his work, that I would go here. If you want Infinite Jest is a doorstopper of a book, and it's huge, and a lot of people have a hard time with the length of it. I think similar to that book, this book does, similar to this book, that book does deal with really heavy themes. Mostly it deals with addiction and how people deal with addiction in their life. There's a little bit of that here in The Pale King, but I don't think the way that is handled, the themes are handled, are as effective. I think there's also, a little bit of, one of the other things that I kind of had a hard time with is there's a character named David Wallace in the book, who you take to be the author's voice, and he comes in and has a really long section of the book where he claims that the book is a work of nonfiction, and to me that was kind of just unnecessary, and it's quite kind of unclear why that was kind of inserted, the kind of presumption that this character, David Foster Wallace, or is David Foster Wallace the author, and so everything that's written in the book comes from his time working in the mid-'80s at this tax office. So that was kind of a hard pill to swallow. So overall, I really do recommend this to kind of David Foster Wallace completists only. I think that if you haven't read Infinite Jest, you owe it to yourself to read that book. It's wonderful. It is a slog, but there's a lot of beautifully written passages, and the characters are really interesting. And I think there is a story arc in that book, unlike this one. I'd also, if you want kind of a shorter taste of his work, he wrote 2 nonfiction writing collections. One is called Consider the Lobster. The other one is A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again. Those are both great. He also wrote a really famous commencement speech that I think was collected in McSweeney's that I'd also recommend. So that's who I would recommend the book to. As far as what I'm reading, I am working on Jennifer Egan's, I believe it's Welcome to the Goon Squad, and I will be reviewing that next time. Until then, please feel free to like or subscribe to the channel. Also feel free to follow me on Twitter. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.